Our next guest is a boxing referee and judge from California who has almost 23 years of professional experience. He's refereed nearly 100 world title fights and officiated well over 1,000 bouts. Even if you don't know his name, you'll know his face. Welcome to Title Unboxed, Jack Reiss.
Welcome to Title Unboxed. With more than 40 years of experience in the fight game, our host, Doug Ward, will be covering every corner of the ring as we get comfortable between the ropes. We'll talk with both the lesser knowns and the legends, discuss boxing's rich history and current state of the game. We'll also look at today's latest innovations, equipment breakdowns, and insights you won't uncover anywhere else. Join us now as we take a look inside Title Unboxed.
Jack, welcome to Title Unboxed. It's good to see you.
Good to see you too, Doug. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely, my pleasure. You know, I always find it fascinating, people's life experiences that bring them to the point like where you are now. And let me give you an example. You know, you started out, your dad introduced you to boxing, you got into kickboxing, and then became a firefighter. I think it's fascinating that all those things kind of have come together at this point, and it's made you one of the premier referees in the country. You know, you got boxing experience, kickboxing, which is MMA, and then the firefighting with a little bit of trauma and that, you know, experience in that.
Exactly. And I use all the skills or some of the skills I've gotten from each aspect to assist me in being the best I could be when I'm in the ring as a ref.
Yeah. So you started out as an amateur boxer. Your dad introduced you and your brother. I think you put socks on your hands or something like that and kind of introduced you to the sport. And then you went on to have an amateur career. Huh?
I grew up in New York, and, you know, boxing's really big in New York and fighting in itself. So whether it was in the playground, you know, someone brought out a pair of gloves, or like with me and my dad, putting socks on our hands and encouraging my brother and I to fight. And in the winter, there's, you know, you don't go outside. So in the hallway, I grew up in a 23-story building with hallways and staircases, and we'd always be putting gloves on or socks on and boxing, and just fell in love with it. And went into kickboxing a little bit and did a lot of, you know, a couple of smokers here and there. And then when I became a fireman, I fought for the LA Fire Department against the sheriffs and the LAPD and stuff like that. It was fun.
Yeah, the Guns and Hoses events are big.
Stuff like that, yeah.
Yeah. So when you got into refereeing, talk to me a little bit about that, about what that apprenticeship is like. I know a lot of people just, you know, it's like you appear out of nowhere, when really you paid your dues for what, almost 30 years into this game?
I like to say it's taken me 20 years to be an overnight sensation. You know, I like to say that. So I was very fortunate. The avenues to get into boxing now, I'm not really happy with it. But back in the day, some of the California officials were getting older, and I had an interest in it for a long time. And I guess it was God's will when I started applying myself to try to get it. About a year or so later, maybe 2 years later, something opened up where the California refs were getting older. The California Commission, you know, put a task to the officials, say, we need new officials, you guys should train them. So they had a class for the first and last time ever at that time, and it was a 3-year program. The first year was a classroom session once every 3 weeks to a month. And then that classroom session broke out into moving around the ring with fighters. There was a test every morning when you got there, a quiz. Make a long story short, after a year, you had to declare whether you wanted to be a ref or a judge. And if you declared you were a ref, you had to be a ref and a judge. Then you took a written test, and then they put you in the ring with some people playing as fighters, and they went without you knowing, you know, what they were going to do. And they went through these scenarios, and you had to, you know, handle it like it was a real fight and stuff. And one of the things was if while you were moving around the ring, any of the fighters bumped you, you were gone. Many people got kicked out right there. And it was a really great program taught by Larry Rosadia, Marty Denkin, Lou Filippo, and Pat Russell, 4 legends in, you know, refereeing and stuff. And it was either 98 or 102 people went into this class, and only 8 or 9 made it.
Wow.
Out of all of that stuff. So it was a really good class. And, you know, to their credit, they kicked out some sons who thought that their name would get them through.
Right. Yeah.
And didn't show and didn't put the work in. And that's how I got into it. And there's never been anything like that done before or after that I know of. Until recently, with the cup that you got in your hand from the company that Pat Russell and I put together to train referees.
So what is that like compared to the training that you went through? Because it sounds like that was kind of a process of attrition.
Yeah, well, the difference is now we're taking people who have had some kind of prior experience and helping them elevate their status to go to the next level, or know what it's like to know what's needed to go from the amateur rank to the pro ranks. Because, Douglas, it's a totally different ball game,
yeah.
Amateur, pro. Amateur, they're looking to, a lot for points. Sometimes they don't throw their shoulders and their hips behind the punches. It's like a point situation where in the pros, it's vicious and it's faster, it's harder, and it's vicious. It's for money. It's for your career. So it's way different, a different ball game, totally.
So who were your mentors? You mentioned Pat Russell and Lou Filippo. Who were some of your other mentors as you got into this sport and were growing and in the gyms, in the ring, and just as throughout your apprenticeship?
So it's a great question, and I got to tell you, you can't do this alone. This is not the kind of thing you could read a book and get in the ring, because you're going to have to make a lot of mistakes, and that's going to cost people injury or their career, the mistakes that you're making. So, the best mistakes to make are other people's, best mistakes to learn from are other people's mistakes.
Other people, they get you.
So it's really important to have a mentor. And early in my career, when I was in this class, Marty Denkin, who, world championship referee, legendary in the boxing game, took me under his belt, and him and I used to spend hours on the phone just talking boxing about scenarios. And I'd watch fights on TV, and he'd be watching fights on TV, and we'd call each other and talk about what we saw. And I really got a really great foundation from him. But really what I got from him, other than the foundation, was a feel for the game. Yeah. It's not always black and white. You can't paint one paint color to say that's how it's done. There's a lot of different colors and hues and blends to referee in a match. It's not the letter of the law. It's definitely the spirit of the law. And I can give you 20 examples about that. So he gave me quite a bit of a foundation and a feel for the game. And I think that, coupled with my life's experience and my ice hockey and boxing experience on my own and fire department stuff, I was able to bridge it. But, throughout time, as I got more into it, Pat Russell's become a close friend and a mentor. And when I say a mentor, it's someone I could trust, that I could share an experience with. And he doesn't judge me. We look at the situation and we talk about what you could do different or better. So another guy I do that with is who's one of the most brilliant minds in combative sports. If you haven't interviewed him, you should. Is Big John McCarthy from the MMA world.
Oh, yeah.
Brilliant guy, very close friend. And we, without any holding back, tell each other what we feel about what each other was doing in the ring. He's great. And my other guy I talked to is Tom Taylor, but another younger official, but he's a 40-something-year-old man with a family that, again, there's no judgment. It's a critique, not a criticism, and we share experiences. And as of lately, was very fortunate because of Sole Arbiter. I touch bases with referees all over the world, and we're constantly talking about fights and situations, and we share knowledge, and makes everybody better.
Well, you probably have to have a really thick skin, not just in the learning process, but in the ring. I mean, you guys are criticized all the time for about almost every move you make, either stop a fight too soon, stop a fight too early. It's got to be endless feedback for you.
Yes. In fact, a lot of the times that we get criticized, it's by people that really don't know what they're talking about. And I'm on a mission to assist in any way I possibly can, educate some of the commentators, or all that I can, to make them understand. Douglas, it's cause and effect. It's not just effect. In other words, if a guy gets hit behind the head, it was a foul, but who caused it? A lot of times it's the fighter turning his head, so you don't want to penalize the guy who threw the punch. If the guy who threw the punch threw a straight punch, it's impossible to hit a guy behind the head unless he turns his head. But some of the referees, they make it so much about themselves that they feel this duty to act, and they overact. Oh my God, he got hit behind the head. I've got to do something. Well, wait, cause and effect. What caused it? And, we preach a lot of that. And that's a perfect example of the spirit of the law. It's not always what it seems. And a lot of the commentators, sorry to say, they just don't understand.
Right.
I'll give you a great example. Stephen A. Smith goes off on stuff, and I guess he's getting better, but he really don't know shit.
No, he doesn't.
It is what it is.
Well, I think that's pretty obvious to the anybody that knows anything about boxing. You can tell when somebody knows what they're talking about or not.
Yeah, but these guys got the microphone, we don't. Yeah. So I'm just trying to help elevate boxing and make boxing better by educating everybody to our viewpoints. That's why I appreciate what you're doing with me right now. Hopefully we can give the listeners another viewpoint of this where they consider, oh, I understand what he's saying. I see what they were talking about now, and it's not what I was thinking before. It's this.
Absolutely. Well, and your progression is not that different than an athlete. I mean, you start out in the amateurs, you start out 4-rounders, you start at 6-rounders as you progress in the pros and all that. It's a very similar learning and process, isn't it?
Absolutely, same process. And there's they start you out with 4-rounders, and if you're doing good, they move you up to 6. And there's an unwritten law that you won't even get a regional title fight or something of that nature, a 10 or a 12-rounder, until you've got about 200 fights under your belt. Because there is a process of maturing and settling down and actually seeing what you're seeing, not over-officiating, not stopping fights too soon and things like that, that it takes about 200 fights to even understand yourself and really constantly watching yourself, watching your performance, watching your movement, listening to yourself, what you're saying in the ring, looking at the situation, see how you reacted. If they're going in a circle, 2 little 115-pounders are going, 100 miles an hour because they're so little and fast. As a young referee, I chase them. But as you settle down, I let them go around, and I meet them on the way back. And I'm not thinking about my movement, and I'm not thinking about chasing them. I'm just constantly watching the punches land. It just changes after you settle down a little bit, and it takes a while to settle down.
Right. Well, and the same for fighters.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Which is, I think that's why a lot of guys struggle with retiring. They go on a little bit too long because they have settled down. They become a little bit more just grounded, for lack of a better word. And even though they've lost some athleticism, they're smarter and they're more centered.
That's absolutely true. The older they get. In fact, let me say this. There's things that without your own personal experience or being taught, you could be looking at something and really not seeing what's happening because you just don't have the experience. Well, fighters go through this too. As they settle down and as they, get more comfortable in fights, they see openings that they didn't see before, and they get better and they get calmer and they take advantage of them. They roll their shoulder and drop a counter, things that they never saw before. And from watching other fighters, well, it's the same thing with referees. The more you settle, the more you see. And what I'm trying to preach and teach the people is we want to show you things that once you see it, you can never unsee it. Like a low blow, an inexperienced ref will focus on the low blow, and he'll miss the fact that the guy pulled the other guy's head down while he was going to the body and caused the low blow. So we try to get everybody to see what they'll never unsee, and it'll just make them better. And let me just give you one other thing. When it comes to fighters, I think another reason they don't like to retire is, I've got to tell you, the training and being in the life of training is as pure as a life that you could live. And when you're training for a fight, you push your family, you push all the outside distractions. A fighter, you push all the outside distractions away when you can. Yeah. And all you're doing is taking care of your physical and mental needs for the fight. And it's a pure, pure feeling. And then you're watching yourself and feeling yourself getting in better shape. You're getting in your zone. Your punches are landing. Your punches are cracking and snapping. You're hurting your sparring partners. You start feeling this invincible feeling. You can't wait to get in the ring. You come walking out of the locker room and people are screaming for you. You get in that ring. It's like heroin to these guys. And it's hard for them to walk away from it. It's hard.
That's a good snapshot. You know, I think Sugar Ray Robinson said something, not an exact quote, but he said something along the lines of, you know, until you've been in the ring and felt that feeling, you don't know what it's like.
Yeah.
You know,
it's a great feeling. So feeling in great shape and going into battle is just an incredible, I'm sure you fought for amateur or something.
Yeah.
It's just a great feeling, taking on a personal challenge, leaving it all out there, knowing that there's no net under this tightrope. It's all on me, but I've done my best and I'm going to give it a shot. I mean, it's so pure. It's wonderful.
Yeah. So do you remember your first title fight that you refereed?
Unfortunately, it gets a little clouded because there were so many titles.
Sure.
But in my first few title fights, I wasn't great by no means. I was so caught up in the moment and so nervous. I was inside my own head too much.
Yeah.
And I thought everybody was looking at me. And then it took me a while to understand that people who don't like you or people who do like you, people who want you to fail around the ring, your competition, or people who like you are watching you. But as soon as that fight starts and you're smooth and you move away and you're not doing anything obstructive, they're not even looking at you.
Right.
And it took me a while to understand that.
Well, I guess part of a referee's job, and correct me if I'm wrong, is to not be noticed, to not be a part of it. You talk about over-officiating. You see that at times, but, would that be a correct assessment?
Yes. We try to preach to everybody, it's not about you. This has nothing to do with you. There's a catalyst and you're the response. And you have a duty to act, but it doesn't mean you have to do anything. You know, there's a rule on an intentional foul with injury. A referee shall take 2 points. Well, if it's a small injury, you don't have to take 2 points. Or if it's an intentional foul without an injury, you don't have to take 2 points. Mm-hmm. And if you leave your ego out of it, you'll be a lot more relaxed and you'll just react to the situation. You know, even a punch behind the head when a guy's down. If a guy gets knocked down and he's on the ground and the fighter goes to hit him with intent and misses, it's different than if he goes to hit and he lands. So they shouldn't be equal. The punishment has to fit the crime. And a lot of officials who don't have the experience react that everybody's watching me, I've got to do something, and they overreact. And I got to tell you, 1 point in a fight can change everything.
Sure.
And, you know, the equivalent that I like to give it is if you were a police officer, disqualifying someone is like shooting them. But taking 2 points is like locking them up and putting them in jail. Right. And if you talk to cops, they try to do everything they possibly can to settle it without having to take people to jail. A good street cop will do that. You know, the guys I grew up with in New York, they'd rather come over and kick you in the butt and send you home, and you know they'll do it again. But in boxing, we don't have a lot of tools as referees to use like they do in the NFL and stuff and Major League Baseball and all these other things. In the NFL, they have smaller penalties, medium penalties, and greater penalties, 5, 10, 15 yards. They have offsetting penalties. They have fines. They have all these things they can levy to keep control of the game and keep it safe. And anything egregious, they're going to act with the appropriate response. In boxing, all we have is warnings, points, disqualifications.
Yeah,
so
it's very interesting. And
you have to manage a fight with those three things. And really, the demand from the public, the outcry of the public is they don't want us to take a lot of points. They don't want us to disqualify a lot of people. So they're telling us, manage this fight with your people skills. And, you know, fortunate for me, I grew up in Brooklyn on the streets. You have to develop people skills or you won't even be able to eat lunch on a crowded day in a delicatessen, you know. So, and getting on the trains with crowds, and you just develop, people skills. And that's the best way to do it is using your people skills and your communication skills to keep control of the fight without having to take points.
Right. Interesting. Yeah. So there's got to be a lot that goes into it that people don't see. I mean,
oh my God.
When you're going into a fight, what kind of research do you do on the fighter, if any? And also kind of as you're in the locker room giving them pre-fight instructions, what things are you looking at? How do you assess a fighter? Their movements, their physicality, their mental acuity. What all things are you looking at as you head into that to be able to gauge what this person is before a fight and during the fight?
Great question. And let me tell you, it is so different today being a referee than it was 20, 30, and 40 years ago. The world has changed so much. And the reason the world has changed so much is because of these stupid things that we got now. Everybody's got a camera on their phone. It's so inexpensive to have cameras like the promoter or the promoter of the fight to put cameras in the arena. Every fight is televised. In the old day, I can make a mistake in front of 300 or 400 people and no big deal. I learned a lesson. I got booed by 400 people and they forgot about it. But now everything you do is on camera and it stays for life. It's on the internet. In fact, the fights I do, I can pretty much guarantee before I step out of the ring, the whole fight or parts of it are on television or on the internet. Or on the internet. And it's way, way harder to do fights right now than it's ever been because of it. So I apologize. What was the original question again?
No, I mean, that's interesting because, and then those clips go online in or out of context, and you probably get a ton of criticism,
Yes, you get criticized more now than ever. So the second part of it is that same social media and that same technology, they're using it against us. You got to use it for yourself. And what I mean by that is we have BoxRec now, we have YouTube now, and we have something that is provided to us by the California State Athletic Commission and good commissions. It's called a BSI index, a boxer's severity index that BoxRec puts out to the commissioners to help the commissioners approve fights. So I get all this information on the front end, and I could look. I know my fighters 3 to 5 to 7 days prior to me doing that fight, and I go watch clips of him on YouTube. I look at his record. I look at his last 5 fights. I look at what weights he's fought at. Is this guy coming up? Has he ever won at this weight class? What's the gap between the last fight he had and this fight he had? And all these little pieces put a story together. I get to know before I walk in if he's a righty or a lefty. I get to know if he's been knocked out a bunch lately. I get to know his age. We didn't have that 30 years ago, 25 years ago. Right. So it's used against me. I'm going to use it for me. And I do a lot of research on the fighters. And I could see what this guy did against his last 2 lefty opponents and stuff like that. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And then when I actually go to the arena, after I've done all my research and I got the BSI index, and that BSI index, I'll try to briefly explain it to you. His age, his last 5, I say he, it's he and she, I'm saying both. The last 5 fights they've had, if they won or lost, the distance between the last few fights, some guys take off a year or 2 and they're coming back, whatever. It goes into a computer, and an algorithm that's in that computer spits out a number. The lower the number, the better ability the fighter has. Higher number, it's bad. So the lowest I've ever seen is a -1, and the highest I've ever seen is a +5. So for my boss, when he's making fights and he's matchmaking, he pops these things into his program that he's allowed to have. We don't get it. He gives it to us, but not the actual program. He gives us the results. So he can see right away, wow, the computer's telling me this might not be a approvable match to make. Gotcha. Then he starts doing his research into why. And many times the computer isn't 100% accurate because they're not taking the human factor in. The guy's abilities, because of who he's fought and how long he's been around, are much better than what the computer shows. So my boss will say, instead of making it a 10 rounder, I'm only going to approve 8. I'm only going to approve 6. And they'll give that promoter an opportunity to have this fight made, but at a lesser scale. And you got to understand, you know, what the public doesn't understand, and I'd love them to understand, is when a promoter and a matchmaker get together and get fighters and put them together, there's a story they're putting out. Here is the old champion, the ex-champion. He's on his way down, but he thinks he's got one last hurrah in for a championship fight against this 17-0 young, upcoming, undefeated fighter who's going to get his first real test of his career. And if we go stopping the fights way too soon, the story didn't play out. And both guys feel robbed. The public feels robbed. So that's another aspect of it people don't see, Douglas. They don't realize that, I don't want to say we're storytellers, the promoter and the matchmaker are, but we're there to facilitate the story and let it do our very best. This is my mantra. I do my very best to let that fight come to a natural conclusion without inserting myself, because that's what the fans come to see.
That's great.
So anyway, I got all these tools as far as preparation. And then when I get to, you know, I've checked them and I've watched YouTube fights on the guys. I look at their tendencies. I see if they've been disqualified or points taken away for certain tendencies. And I usually know who's in the corners. When I get to the arena and I go to give pre-fight instructions, this is where my fire department experience comes in.
Yeah.
I establish in my mind a baseline on that fighter. What is normal for that fighter who's supposed to be in his tip-top shape at his best at that moment, because he's done with training, he's rested for a few days after 6 weeks to 2 months of training, and he hasn't been hit yet. So he should be at his peak right then and there. And I get him up in the dressing room and I make him talk to me. I make him walk. I get a feel for what they're doing. When I get in the ring, I try to get in the ring first so I can watch these guys walking out of the dressing room, how they navigate the ropes when they get in, how they bounce around the ring. That's them at their best. Now I have a baseline, and as they're taking damage, I'm watching them deteriorate from that baseline. And in my head, I'm saying to myself, there's a point, Douglas, where I'll go, I've seen enough. He's deteriorated far enough. I got to start getting this guy out of here. Does that answer the preparation portion of what you were asking for?
It does. There's so much to it. I wish people could understand what all goes into it, you know?
Oh.
So I've always wondered this, because you hear referees talk about, you know, exceptional fights, and, you know, Richard Seal always gets asked about Hagler Hearns and all that. Do you have an ability to pull away from the fight enough to enjoy it and actually realize what you're seeing if you're seeing in the middle of a spectacular fight, or no, it's just all business and you can't think of anything but, you know, what you're doing as a job?
I absolutely have an appreciation. And man, during the fights, when you're in those type of fights, I'm thanking God. I can't believe what a great fight this is. And I got the best seat in the house. I'm never taking my eye off of the amount of damage that they're taking. But I just, I had a fight the other night. A 10-rounder that was just incredible from bell to bell. They were cracking for 10 rounds. What the only thing that took me out of that zone of enjoying the fight was Aleem was being outlanded with hard punches, 2-1, and his punch output had deteriorated, and the quality of his punches had dropped off in round 5. So instead of being able to just enjoy it, I was thinking about, okay, I'm watching this kid deteriorate. There's going to be a point I have to take him out. But yes, to answer your question, when we're in the ring and there's a great fight, we're enjoying it just as much as everybody else, for sure.
You know, do you feel like, trainers should be more active in stopping fights, or is that the referee's job, the doctor's job? Who do you feel has the most culpability? Because, for my own experience, I've been in the corner and I've told doctors to stop the fight from the corner. That way it doesn't leave it on the referee. You as the corner are not stopping the fight. So, you can save face that way. What are your feelings about that? And who's most responsible, if any, if it's just a group effort or solely?
I don't think anybody's individually more responsible than the next. But as a team, as a group, if we all do our job, we're going to allow the fans to get the best possible fight that they could have of these guys. We're going to give both of the guys an equal opportunity to show their skills that night without letting anybody get hurt. So I'll give you an example of what I believe I am. My first and foremost responsibility in that ring is the fighter's safety. And people are human, they're emotional, they do things for the correct and wrong reasons. And you know as well as I do, to become a second, all you got to do is pay a $50 fee. We don't know anything about the seconds. We don't really know their ability. It could be the guy's best friend that's his biggest cheerleader, and he ends up being a second in the corner. And so really, and the matchmaker put this fight together, so he's got some culpability to it, and the promoter for putting on's got culpability to it. But the cornermen have a culpability to it, to be honest. To be honest. They know their fighter. They should know their fighter better than anybody else. They spend 6 weeks, 6 days a week with the guy. They know if he's had a good training camp. They know his past history. What if he's been knocked out during sparring? If his wife hit him over the head with a bat 2 weeks earlier because he was caught cheating on her. We don't know this. They do. So it's really important for them to be as honest as possible with us. And what I find is a lot of times because of the education, the lack of education, and the level of intelligence, some of the fighters the cornermen, and some of they're personally committed, and they lose sight of their fighter. They have so much of their own life committed that they're thinking about what the guy needs to do to win. They're not looking at what damage he's taken, whether it's purposeful or they just don't care. I don't know, but it happens. And one of my jobs is to be the conscience of the corner. I walk in the corner, and I'll say to the coach, I'll say, hey, man, you know him better than me. He's taking a lot of headshots. And sometimes they wake up and they didn't even realize what was going on in front of them. So it's a group effort, but there's got to be and the commission has responsibility, and the doctors as well. And as a group, the doctors and my commission lead inspector are a second set of eyes and ears for me. If I'm so caught up in fouls or I'm having a bad night and my mind's someplace else, the doctor will get up on the ring apron and go, I'm worried about the guy in the blue corner. Or he'll go like this to me. He'll go, keep your eye on this guy. I go into the corners. Let me say this too. Every round of every fight, I do what's called a flyby. I pick up the cards on the 1 minute rest period, and I walk into each corner. I don't interrupt. I don't do anything. I just look and listen. I'm looking at the guy's body language on the stool, comparing it to where he was when he bounced in that ring fresh and ready to go. I'm looking at the physical damage on his face. I'm watching his stomach and his chest expand to see how much air he's sucking, because if he's sucking a lot of wind in round 2 and we got an 8 or a 10 or a 12 rounder, I know this guy's in trouble and he didn't have a good training camp. And I'm listening to what the coach is saying to him, because Douglas, I can't tell you how many times a fighter is getting his ass kicked. And I walk into the corner and the coach is saying, you're doing great. Just keep doing what you're doing. And I'm saying to myself, I got to get this kid out of here. And the other big resource that I have in California in the corners is we have an inspector in each corner for every fight. I rely on them to tell me if they've heard the fighter complaining about he can't see, his head hurts, he's dizzy, he's hurt some other part of his body. Doesn't mean I'm going to stop a fight, but it's little tools in my tool chest to where when enough of these tools come in, I'm sure I've got to pull this guy out. And together with the assistance of the doctors, lead inspector, and the inspectors that are in the corner, and my own experience, and hopefully the cornermen, we're going to let this guy perform to the best of his ability without him getting hurt and get him out sooner. One more thing I want to tell you that we do in California that is just outstanding, in my opinion, on a 8, 10, or 12 round fight, at the end of 6, if it's a lopsided score, 6-0 or 5-1, and the one round that the fighter run was maybe round 1 or 2, so now the next 4 or 5 he's lost in a row, the chief inspector is allowed to tell us the score. So now I know a guy Now I got a guy who's got visible physical damage, and he can't win mathematically without a knockout. So I got to assess, does he have a puncher's chance? Is he really there to compete, or is he just trying to survive? And what's best for boxing? I could ask myself those questions. So it's another great tool we have to get that kid out safely.
That's a great add-on.
Yeah.
I guess the reason I asked that question is just to shine the spotlight on how much responsibility you guys do have. Because again, you've got corners that aren't necessarily educated in the sport. There is no learning process for those coaches.
That was
and
a
trainers.
nice way of saying it. I wish I could have said it as nice as you.
That, and sometimes you got to save the fighter from himself. Most guys are not going to quit. They're going to go out on their shield. And that, again, is a testament to how much responsibility lies with you guys on a daily basis in the ring.
There's 4 things we have to save the fighter from. We have to save him from his opponent, from his manager, from his chief second, and from himself. I don't know what order it's in, but a lot of times, if the opponent's not knocking him out, these 2 have failed, and then we got to see if he's a warrior, we got to save him from himself.
Yeah, for sure. And again, you got to love that about fighters, that they have that kind of mentality, but at the same time, it sometimes hurts them in the end.
Douglas, I know what it's like to be punched in the face. You know what it's like to be punched in the face. I wish a prerequisite for a referee would be that you must have had an amateur fight, at least one, or a controlled sparring session with somebody else witnessing it, a referee witnessing it, whatever, because they don't, if they've never been punched in the face, they don't have the compassion for what these guys and gals are going through. And when you have been, you're definitely more compassionate. You look after the fighter's safety, in my opinion.
That makes a ton of sense. So let me ask you a question. I've always thought the standing 8 count should be mandatory. It should be applied in all fights. I could be wrong. I've always felt like that's a good time for a referee to be able to implement that, to assess the situation. Like you say, you don't have all the timeouts and all that other sports have. What are your feelings about that? I could be totally wrong. I'm not a referee. I've just felt like that would be a nice addition to any commission to say, this is a point for you to use that to stop the action, assess where the fight is, and give you a little bit of a time to just look at the whole situation.
I totally respect what you're saying. It would be a great tool. The only thing that I look at when it comes to professional boxing, this is the hurt game. This isn't the points game. This isn't an amateur fight. Yeah. And stopping someone to give him an 8 count might take away the advantage where the guy could have finished him and won the fight, and he wouldn't have taken any more damage. Mm-hmm. And it's really not good, in my opinion. It's really not the best thing to do in pro boxing, because people come to see the human spirit. They come to see Gotti Ward round 9. Right. They come to see a fight where the ebb and flow goes back and forth, where one or both guys just refuses to quit and fights through everything he can. And at the end, he's standing, win or lose. He didn't quit, or it wasn't stopped too early. And it actually inspires people that the things they're going through in their life, all right, no matter what happens, I got to give it my all. And having a standing 8 count will change the game quite a bit. So if you're the fighter and you got this guy hurt on the ropes and you're about to finish him, and then you can now go to the next level, to maybe a title fight, and then he gets 12 seconds worth of rest, and then the bell rings, or he holds you. Now he got himself together enough. He was in trouble, and now that 12 seconds allowed him to, just wake up enough that when you came in, he wrapped you up, and he got out of the round. He got the 1 minute rest, come out. And let me tell you something. I see it all the time, and you might not be aware of it. Maybe you're aware of this. A fighter who's, say this is a scale of their damage. A fighter who was like this at the end of round 3 or 4, whatever, right? He goes back, he gets some rest, and he comes back in round 4 like this for about 20 to 30 seconds, and he's right back where he was. just that air and that rest, give him that little push. Well, imagine when you almost had a guy out and almost won the purse and almost got to the next level of a title fight. Some referee, and it tends to allow a lot of cheating from hometown refs. You know what I mean? With their guys and the promoter's guy gives this guy a rest. Now he comes out and he knocks the other guy out. It's just, for pro boxing, the less we have to do, the better. You know.
Okay. Well, that's good to know. That's a good perspective. I had not looked at it that way.
I don't know
was looking
if it's
at it from a
right,
safety
but it's
standpoint.
mine.
Well, I think you're probably right. I love being educated. I love learning more about it, the sport, especially from somebody that's had your experience.
Well, thank you.
Let's go back to this. What are some of the greatest fights you've been in the middle of? What ones stand out in your mind? Is like, oh my gosh, I was glad I was the third man in the ring for that one.
Well, the most recent obvious one that I did was Wilder Fury 1. And it was a great fight because it was two humongous heavyweights, 6'5" and 6'9", 225 and 256 at the time. And they both came to win. And they were going at it. And I couldn't believe how Tyson Fury could box for 12 rounds. And when he got up off the ground after that 12th round knockdown, I'm just glad I was part of it because it's something that's shown over and over again, for eternity. So I think it'll be shown in heavyweight history.
And he didn't look like he was getting up. I mean, did he from your perspective? From the TV perspective, it was like, he's out.
Yeah. Boxing is like anything else, especially in today's society where there's a lot of bullshit, instead of real commentary. It's false news. It's fake news on a lot of things. So the story is Tyson Fury, his eyes rolled back in his head slammed against the canvas. He was unconscious. None of those things are true, Doug.
So your perspective of that fight and that moment in that fight was different than the general audience, the viewer.
Absolutely. So all the things that we discussed a moment ago aren't true, and I'm going to explain. So when he got hit with the punch, I watched him go down, and I believed he took the fall. He took two good shots. There's no question about it.
Right.
But he took the fall on his elbow and his shoulder, and I believed that his head never hit the ground. And when I said down, I turned to the timekeeper. She said 1. And when I turned back, if you refer to that first picture I sent you, you'll see Tyson Fury's right leg up. Well, an unconscious person won't be holding his right leg up. And then the other part about it is so I said, let me see what I got, because his leg is up, he's not out. And I took 2 steps, and from where I took the 2 steps, I could see his eyes open. And as soon as I got to him, he was on the ground, and as I got to him, he went like this. He was conscious of what was going on. And if you look at those 3 pictures, you'll see his leg up. On the second picture, you'll see his head isn't on the ground on the knockdown. And his eyes are open at that time. And then he laid back to take a rest. And then when I get over there, you'll see his eyes looking at me in those 3 pictures. Yeah. So anyway, that was a lot of fun. That fight was particularly a lot of fun, and many others. I've been so fortunate. I've done a lot of top fighters of today and some of yesterday. Bernard Hopkins, 5 Andre Ward fights, 5 Lomachenko fights, 5 Triple G fights, Spence Crawford, Porter. I'm the luckiest guy in the world. I'm a happy guy. I never did a Pacquiao fight. I wish I could have, but he always fought in Vegas or someplace else.
Yeah, I think those days are gone probably at this point.
Yeah, I had fun with Ward and Rodriguez. That was a lot of fun, that fight too. They hated each other.
Yeah, really?
Oh my God, what a crazy fight that was. When I walked in the arena, you can cut the tension with a knife. Really? And I got confronted with my uniforms in my hand and my bag in my hand by the promoter. Jack, Rodriguez is doing this. And then he was 10 pounds overweight. And he did it on purpose because he felt he'd have a better advantage fighting Andre Ward where he could rough him up, in my opinion. But he did it. And he took a $200,000 hit from his $1 million purse. And then because he didn't make weight, here's a backstory you'll love. the next day, they made a mandatory next day weigh-in because he was 10 pounds heavier. They didn't want him to be 20 pounds heavier than Ward. They said, you can't go over X amount of more weight from right now. So the weigh-in was supposed to be at 8 a.m. Someone allegedly from Ward's camp stole the scale from the commissioner's office so they wouldn't be able to weigh Rodriguez for another 3, 4, 5 hours. So we'd have to keep that weight down for the fight.
That'd be great. If that story's true, that's great.
Yeah, and one of the inspectors was chasing the guy through the lobby of the hotel that they were doing this in with the scale or with the cord from the scale.
Wow.
And it was just, I mean, nobody knows this stuff about boxing, but that's what happened.
Well,
so I've been
involved
with stuff like that. And then, I've been fortunate enough where I've gone to quite a few places around the world, and I've refereed in Moscow and in Australia and China and Germany and Japan and the Philippines. I'm a young, just a guy from the streets of Brooklyn. I've got to see the world. I'm the luckiest guy in the world. Boxing has been real good to me.
Well, it's same for amateurs and pros. They get to travel the world. They pay a price, but they get to travel the world and see a lot of things. So in all of your experiences, so that maybe was one of the biggest, greatest fights you've seen. What about the most bizarres or something that's just like to this day, you're like, I can't believe this happened during this fight?
I can't think of one offhand, but I can tell you the ugliest fight I've ever had to do that I was wishing the fight would have been over. And if they ever fought again, I won't ref them, was Pacquiao Bika fought Anthony Durrell and Douglas. It was, because of their styles, it was 1, hold, 1, 2, hold. And it was like, I must have had to break them 150 times in a 12-round fight. And the crowd was booing them. And then they start booing you. Come on, ref, do something. But there was nothing I was going to do shy of disqualifying both of them that would ever have changed what they were going to do. That was their styles. They were going to stick to it. And I figured, did you ever hear the expression? I think it was Roosevelt. I can't remember who said it. When you're going through hell, keep going. I said, you know what?
That felt like that.
I'm just gonna break them as fast as I possibly can. Every time they get tied up, and let them be a stinker and let the crowd hate them. Right. Never want to see them again, rather than me trying to convince these guys to stop this style of fighting.
Yeah.
Crazy.
Well, we've discussed a lot of stuff here. What can be done, if anything, to improve judging criteria and just ongoing education in this sport for judges, for referees, the entire process?
That's a great question.
It's a big question.
There is a solution, but it's a big solution. So there are too many sanctioning bodies. There are too many commissions, and there are too many entry points for referees and judges. I am not making this up. You could be boxing groceries right now at Costco for a living, and next week, 3 weeks from now, you're judging a professional boxing match because your father is somebody important in some state or some commission in another country that gets to one of the commissioners. Okay? That is just wrong. This is a professional sport, and there should be, like Major League Baseball, no one goes through that front door to become an official without going through the MLB office and demonstrating that they've had amateur experience or some kind of skill set, and then they'll start them out on a 4-rounder off TV somewhere and test the guy's skills out. Listen, I'm not going to say names, but recently we saw something really bad, in my opinion, in a fight. I think it was the main event or a co-main event on ESPN. A referee was put into a 12-round interim title with a very seasoned ex-champion against a young, upcoming monster. And that ex-champion was getting his ass handed to him. He had he's a warrior. If I told you his name, and I'll tell you it off camera,
Yeah.
He had prior cuts to a point where they did plastic surgery to repair the thick amount of scar tissue that was in his brow area. You might know who I'm talking about already. And he got headbutted multiple times. And in the 10th, it was a 10 rounder. And early in the 10th round, or sometime in the 10th round, that cut that he had got opened up by now a vicious headbutt, where the plastic surgery had been destroyed, what he did. And there was a ledge. There was two pieces, his top skin and his bottom skin. Yeah. There was a ledge. This cut was so deep, I don't know if you could see bone, but the muscle had been torn. The guy lost every single round of the fight. It's the last round of the fight. It's a headbutt. Stop the fight, go to the scorecards.
Right. The
referee that this commission decided to put in, that was his 29th professional fight as a referee. Wow. And he brings the fighter to the doctor. He says, "Doc, what do you think?" And the doctor goes, "It's a very bad cut. Stop the fight." And he goes, "Come on, doc, there's 30 seconds left. Can't we just let this go?" "Well, why are you bringing him to the doctor if you wanted to let it go?" And then the doctor goes like, the doctor's, he's feeling pressure now.
Yeah.
He was wrong, but I understand. He's going, looking at the cut, and he's doing this. And he goes like this. He looks up to the clock and he goes, 30 seconds. And he goes, "Yeah, 30 seconds. Just let it go, doc." And he goes, "Nah, stop it." And the guy goes, "Doc, 30 seconds. And he looks up again. And he goes, "All right, let it go." And they let it go. And the champion took unnecessary punishment again in those 30 seconds that he didn't have to. So my point is this. Now that was a 10 rounder that was going to, I think was a 10 rounder, might have been a 12, that was going to lead this guy to get a title fight. And this champion, this is it, bro. You either keep going on or it's time to retire. Co-main event on ESPN. You think Major League Baseball would take a guy that umpired 28 professional baseball games and put him behind home plate in a playoff game?
Right. Yeah.
They would never do it. The NFL, no, they would never do it, but we do it. I don't know. It's ludicrous. And I know stories I could show you videos after this thing of a guy who is clueless, Douglas. He's clueless. He watches a fighter turn his back to the other fighter while he's holding the guy. So the fighter on top is totally behind him and rifle 3 punches behind the fighter's head. The guy goes down holding his head and he goes, "Stop." And he's like this. The ref. He's a deer in the headlight. And then he tells the guy to get up, and then he walks over to the standing. He sends the standing fighter to the neutral corner, and then when the guy gets up, he starts a count on him.
Oh wow!
He just got punched 3 times behind the head, and he started a count. And I've got so many videos of stuff like that. And look, I make mistakes all the time. I'll be the first to tell you. But at least I have some semblance of I know what I'm doing in there or what I'm trying to accomplish. To put people in that don't know how to judge. How's this? This stories? Do you think this is a conflict of interest? You're a heavyweight fighter who's a contender for the championship. You're his trainer. You're his chief second. And your friend brings you over 2 states, 3 states away from you and has you judging fights that night, and you're judging heavyweights that are possible contenders. You think that's a conflict of interest?
Yeah.
We got it. We got it.
Just a little bit, yeah.
Because
that happens regularly, though.
That promoter is friends with you, and it's stupid.
Yeah.
It's just ridiculous.
Yeah, that's unfortunate.
To answer your question,
yeah,
we need to put all of the judging and all of the referee training on this. Everybody's got to be on the same page. There's 4 criteria that we use for judging professional bouts. The Association of Boxing Commission is trying to give uniform training. Excuse me. Dwayne Ford, I don't know if you're familiar with Dwayne Ford.
Yep.
He has an excellent class on the judging criteria and how to break down the difference. Was it a close round, a decisive round, extremely decisive? He has this great scale that someone that has no experience can at least understand where that round fell in. And it'll give us all better examples. So if anyone would take an ABC judges training course from Dwayne, they would be well ahead of the game. It's that kind of thing we need to do across the board, because think about this. A guy in, I'm not saying this is true, but just say Iowa. He's a friend of the commissioner's son, and they put him in to judge. He doesn't know what he's looking. He might have been a boxing fan forever. He might not understand the 4 criteria. He certainly hasn't been trained on it. He's judging fights. And then somehow he gets another one, another one, another one. Now he's a judge, and he's been in 5 years. He still don't know anything, and he's going to sanctioning body conventions, and now they're putting him in title fights. Or he's doing title fights in his state, and he really doesn't even understand how to judge. He's never been tested on it, never been held accountable for it. We've got to get everybody on a level playing field as far as with training in these two skills, these two crafts, refereeing and judging.
Well, I'd love to see that happen, and it should, because you got fighters' livelihoods at stake here, not only just their health, but their livelihoods and their ability to perform,
And sometimes these commentators who are sensationalists, and they do think, they scream and holler about a judge, and I don't like it, but sometimes they're right. Sometimes they're right. I don't agree with the idiot who put out the 3 judges' names and where they live, and some of those judges got death threats. I don't agree with the idiot who did that, that commentator, because I'd like to put his name out and where he lives and let him see what it's like. But they're right about the fact that the judge was, sometimes about totally incorrect in their judging, or the referee didn't have a clue. They are correct.
Well, Jack, it's been a great, insightful conversation. I want to thank you for all of your contributions to sport. Thanks for the Sole Arbiter contribution you're making to educating judges and officials, and your ongoing efforts in that area.
And thank you for having me on the show. And once again, thank you for the title bags and the stuff that you gave us. That was wonderful for the class that we taught. I appreciate it very much. And thank you for doing this podcast. If you ever have a question about a fight or a ruling, please give me a call, and I'll give you the letter of the law and the spirit of the law, and you make the decision what think it could be unintentional fouls, accidental fouls, or anything odd that happens.
I love it. You'll hear from me.
I love it. I look forward to it.
Thanks again, Jack. Take care.
All right, Douglas, take care, and thanks for having me.
Thank you for watching this episode of Title Unboxed. If you're anything like me, you can never get too much boxing. So if you'd like to watch more episodes, you can find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and our Title Boxing YouTube page.